Hey there, how's it going? And welcome back to the worst Warmachine channel on the internet. I'm Malorian, and this is Malorian Weekly. Now, I just went through a big rant. I actually just recorded this whole thing, but I just wanted to redo it because, man, I came out super mega negative, and that's not what I want this show to be about. So we're going to retake this, and what are we talking about today? We're talking about, is infantry still viable in Warmachine? And you can already tell right there where that negativity is coming from. From those who don't know, I'm a real infantry person. I'm all about throwing models in your face. Back when I used to be good was back in the day where I was actually very viable to be taking 60 models, infantry models, and just cramming it down the other person's throat. And obviously, that's not working anymore. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, because I think it's a very interesting topic, both in terms about, like, is it true? How did we get here? And then what should we do with it now? So I guess the very first thing I should be doing as we get into this is I have to defend my position. My whole premise that infantry would not be viable. Well, Malorian, what are you even talking about? What proof do you have that infantry's even in trouble right now? Well, I mean, we could be talking about how I did well with 60 models before, but not now. But that's just, me. That's my one experience. What other things are we seeing right now? We could be looking at tournament lists, but I think we can also be looking at things like releases. Just the fact that every single time you see a new release coming out, it's an archon that has big sweeping attacks, or maybe like it explodes as it shoots, or it's going to be doing this big spray that's going to be killing stuff, or now, we have all these other super solos where one shot's not good anymore, right? Like, you used to have something like this good old gun mage captain where it has one shot, has a one cool shot. No, you would never see that anymore. Now it's something where maybe 2 shots, like 2 shots is okay, but 4 shots. You want something where you have 2 guns, each one can shoot twice, and pew, 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 pew. You're just killing down all the infantry you want. Or maybe you have like a big AOE that does like multiple AOEs, or, it's not even half damage, it's what boosted damage, or whatever. It seems like everything coming out now is all about killing infantry. And even since the type of stuff where we've seen things in the past where they'd have like berserk and overtake or something like that, where you can kill something, move an inch, kill something, move again, and that just eats up any infantry you see out there. And we're starting to see more and more pieces like that. That's not as much as the super solos and all the things kind of designed to be killing as much infantry as possible. But again, just another piece of the puzzle. So when you see all these new releases all being based around trying to be killing stuff, yeah, infantry is in trouble. You don't see that anymore. If we talk about now going back to those tournament lists, back when we actually had tournaments, you don't see those lists anymore. They're taking tons and tons of infantry. That's a Mark II thing. That's an early Mark III thing. That's not the now. Now, I guess going along with that, let's kind of explain how we got even to this point. Because it's one thing to be understanding, sure, Malorian, this is what's happened in the last year, but Warmachine's been going on for quite a while. How did we actually get to this point here? And I think the big thing to understand is that in Mark 1, it was all about the battle group. It was all about like this steampunky, warcaster coming out with its robots, and I'm using my magic to do crazy things while I'm powering up my robots to do their crazy things, and my robots are fighting your robots. And like, sure, there's some infantry in there, but they're really just infantry to get squashed by the big robots. So it was really just battle group versus battle group. And that was the big thing that they were pushing with it then. Now, come on to Mark II, this changed very significantly. And I think the reason why that changed is that they really changed the way that scenarios went. And so all of a sudden, when you're in a spot where, okay, it's cool, we can get in there, we can fight, but oh, there's these scenario pieces, and the first one to get this number wins? Well, I'm just going to run at you, and I'm going to block you, and if I can block you and score these things, I just win. So whether it's something where like maybe it's my old Kane 2 build where I just take a bunch of whatever cheap things I can, they run into your face, and then Kane 2 just slowly kills anything that's being problematic, or whether it's Haley 2 and I'm running actually not to your face, just off of it so that you can't swing at me, popping my feet so that, okay, you can either attack, but you can't attack because I'm not in range, or you can move, but then you can't attack, and then either way, you're way over there, I blocked you out from this scenario, hooray, I win. And PP really looked at this and they very clearly said they don't like that. They said in interviews, made it very clear that that way that the game was being played was not two things. One was not their original intent of the game, of this is going to be a game of warjacks and battle groups, but also was just a negative play experience, right? If you're a person that walks into a game and you're like, yeah, we're going to do like this chess trading back and forth and it's going to be a battle of wits, and then all your opponent does is pushes things forward and you lose because you just can't kill things fast enough, like, hooray, that sucks, right? Like, it's just so awful. And so they changed that. When we got to Mark III, you don't see that anymore. Now all of a sudden the steamrollers are really set up so that you need to be having this amount of points more than your opponent so they can work on counter scoring. The jacks are more powerful, whether it's the jacks or the war beasts, now they're getting extra power and they can do these extra things. And so that type of idea really shows where they're moving things away from the power of the infantry and going back to the battle group, but with good reason, right? We can talk about some other reasoning that are potentially there. Like you could be saying like, well, infantry are okay, but I mean, it's a complex, large package, and it's a lot easier for us to be, instead of sculpting several models, let's just make one model. And then, I mean, I can sell my solos for like the dollars per model a lot higher than what is for the infantry. And especially if it's bigger models, I can charge even more money. We can get into that type of line of thinking, but it has no evidence behind it. So that's not the way I want to go. The way I want to go is with that intention of how the game is, they want to be played. They want to be having showcase models. They are wanting you to really want to be using your big jacks and your big models because that's what they wanted the game to be about. So okay, if that's what we're saying, for whatever reason, we got to a spot where it's about robots, infantry kind of started like wrestling their way in, and now they're back into a world of robots. Okay, what does infantry do now? Is infantry just not viable? Should I just grab my garbage, come over here and scoop off all these models? Because I mean, like, I got all these trenchers here, all these storm guard, all these pirates, all these drudges, all these steelheads. I have a lot of infantry. I might be addicted to infantry. And this is now not the time for that. So how not the time for that is this? How non-viable is infantry, or is infantry even viable at all? So it took me a while to get here, but I had to kind of really show the evidence and show what's been happening to get us to this point. So if we go with the idea that infantry is just not viable at all, we're saying that basically if I take infantry to a game, those points that I could be putting into an archon, a heavy, some super solos, whatever it is now going to go into an infantry block that's going to die and provide no benefit at all. I am literally just going to be taking a handicap going into a game because I took some infantry. So is that hypothesis correct? And I think right at the beginning we can say like, well, no, there's still things that infantry can do. The very first thing that they can do is the idea that you can score zones, right? We're still talking about scenario. Scenario is still a thing. And if you don't have any infantry whatsoever, sure, you can have your caster go into the zone, but that's not always viable because maybe your caster doesn't want to be going that far up, or maybe the circles are on the side and you got to stay in range of your battle group. Whatever it is, you sometimes want to have an infantry unit to do that for you. And so sometimes you do see that people take like the little tiny unit and that's their whole purpose, right? Their purpose is just to be like, hey, I've spent like 5 points on these 2 eliminators and they're just going to go in there and just score that zone and be hard to remove. Okay, that's something they can do. What about that idea of infantry actually going up there and acting like the pawns in chess? I want to be doing what they're supposed to be doing back in like Mark 1, where sure, it's all about the warjacks, but chess is still about the pawns when you get down to it, and positioning and trying to trade up. So I want to have something cheap that I can trade for something expensive. Well, that's tough as well, because a lot of the infantry that they put out now isn't cheap. You're not seeing that, right? You're not seeing like, oh, brand new unit that's only 10 points and it's just this crappy fast unit with tough. They exist. There's other ones out there, but normally when you see new infantry now, there's something elite. There's something really strong. And so sure, that's again maybe a marketing thing, but you would have to be going back and try and find something that is actually survivable and cheap, right? I don't want to be taking something for that use that's going to be like, oh, hitting hard and doing whatever, because I'm expecting it to die, right? I'm wanting that cost trade benefit. So I want something like pirates where they are cheap, they are fast, and they have tough. So even if you shoot me or hit me, I probably can get back up. Or maybe it's something else that's going to have a little bit higher defense or something like that where it can just survive. That's something you can be thinking about. But you have to very, very carefully only take as much infantry so that I'm not losing too much of my force behind me, and I have to be making sure it's just enough to be acting as that barrier. So enough up there that you can't just shoot a charge line through them and it's basically just like a welcome mat as you come in to kill my guys, but not too much that I'm wasting points and just feeding into the things that kill them off easier. So, okay, that's one thing. What about another part where I want cheap things to go aggressively for anti-scenario, the things that I want to like run into your zones and stuff like that? Okay, well again, I want something cheap and fast. If I can have something that is like evasive because it's flying, or incorporeal, or immune to free strikes, that's all cool, but it has to be something fast and cheap. And again, we're talking about how there's not really a lot of those. There's a few recent things where they're putting out some flying units, and so that's maybe kind of along that idea. But again, most of the things are coming out elite. So, okay, again, we're getting to that marketing talk, but strategy-wise, there's still that place there, right? If we're going to be contesting and fighting with our jacks, and it's like, okay, if I can contest your flag in that zone, then I can get ahead on points, and you're forced to come into me and give me the alpha. Well, if I can have some super cheap unit, that is super worth it, right? Like, instead of having 10 points going into a light or a smaller heavy as you have things now, you know, like I can be now just contesting these things turn after turn. They're not trying to get in the way. They're basically going to be hiding and being like, haha, and then go and contest. Okay, I think again, if that's really your plan for them, that's something you can do for them. Now, we had talked about that other use where they're going to be aggressive and they're going to be going out there and trying to hit you. Now, I kind of mocked it because it didn't fit with any of these other strategies, but honestly, it can kind of work. One of the things that's also a big difference from now, from the previous editions, is just how big of a damage swing you can see. So before, if you could go and, you know, like put down a damage buff and like, haha, I have +2 damage. That's like, ooh, that's a big deal. That is nothing now. That is like standard, okay, cool, something just like randomly happened to be there. Now, there seems to be so many layering things that you are now looking at like a damage swing of 4, of 6, 8 even sometimes. It is ridiculous. And then all of a sudden that means that if you have infantry that is normally POW 10s, they're basically like POW 18s. And even though you could go in with a heavy and be like, okay, 2 initials and then 3 bot attacks, well, that's all well and good, but that's like 5 attacks. And if I charge in with a unit of 10, that's 10 attacks. That's double the damage. So if I can actually line these things up, it can actually do that. And of course, if it's something more elite that's even hitting harder or getting double attacks or whatever, wow, that's even better. So I think that there's something to be said with that, but boy, is it risky. You know, if you would be going that way and saying this infantry is going to be aggressively trying to charge into you, I mean, we have seen a whole bunch of range that could take these things out, or like fast void archons, those like teleport in and spray down all your guys. So it is a risk in taking those, but there's still the pieces there where it's still viable. That idea where I can be dropping your armor and then smashing you with this infantry is something that is there and is viable when you get that situation. You just have to be very careful about when you're going to actually go in and try and apply for that. And you have to make sure you have the right caster that's going to be, buffing them up. Make sure you have the right positioning. Make sure that your opponent doesn't have the stuff to take you out in return. All these things. But if you can do that, there's a big reward to be had. So I think what we're trying to say is that there are ways that it is viable. We still have to score scenario. We still have to go and contest scenario. We still have to trade up. This is still kind of a game of chess when we really think about it. And there's enough tools in our belt that we can really even make this cheap infantry take out heavies now. And that's something that we really need to consider. I think what is really the point then is that infantry has to have a very particular goal. No longer is the time that you can just blindly take all the infantry, run it up, and score scenario, but maybe that's not a bad thing. I mean, again, looking at why we got here, that strategy was kind of really lazy, right? I won games without killing any models or even making an attack. That probably shouldn't be how this game plays. So maybe the fact that infantry has had so many predators coming onto it is really bringing the game back to a much better place, a spot a lot closer to chess, where you have to be a lot more careful with how you trade these pieces. Even in chess, you can let some pawns die, but if you just let them die for no reason, you're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble. You have to be very careful that I am gifting this so that I can take something away. That the piece trading has to be very, very important. And I think that's a good thing then. That's just going to be making it so that, okay, you're only taking this small unit to go and score a zone. So now you have all these pieces for these other tactical, all these points rather, for these other tactical pieces. It's going to be having a much more engaging game. If you're going to be going and taking something very specifically just to try and block things up and just enough so that you can piece trade up, you're going to have to be very careful with that and the positioning, and that's going to make for a very enticing game. The other one there where you're going to go for aggressiveness and try and take them out. Again, there's so many pieces and so many activations you have to have just right to make that work for you, that again, that's a much more interesting game than I have a 60 drudges, run derp go, right? Like I have to kind of laugh at what I did before and say that I was the problem. What I was doing was not good for the game. And it's not really a thing that infantry is no longer viable. It's just that mass blind infantry is no longer viable. Infantry is not just viable still, it's required. I would say if you go into a game and you have 0 infantry, you're probably in a lot of trouble. And unless you're planning to win by assassination very quickly or something like that, that scenario is just part of the game. And, maybe they could be improving it a little bit by saying like, not the entire unit needs to be in the zone to score, or something like maybe casters can no longer score circles. It has to be infantry so that you at least have to take something. But even then, even in this world of archons and, Harlows and all those types of things killing all your infantry, you just can't decide to go into a tournament with no infantry and really expect to be hitting those top tables. And so I think then what our conclusion is that infantry is viable. You just have to be smart with it now. So there you go. That's my take on, is infantry viable? I'm still going to play by my old silly ways and meme it up and throw things out there, but that's me. I'm okay losing. For the rest of you that I want to win, take just the right amount of infantry. So either way, if you have any thoughts on these, I always love hearing this, guys. Please post it down below. I'll gladly chat with you about it. And otherwise, we'll catch you later. Bye.